Hey, Kimberly Akimbo fans. Annie Morrison here. It's been a while since I've done anything on any social media, and that's because I've been living my life. I forgot to inform you about it. I got really fascinated by talking to our crew on this Broadway national tour of Kimberly Akimbo. Because I've never really seen any footage anywhere of what a load in and a load out for a traveling touring company goes through, what the crew has to do. Now, I've known they've set up cameras so you can watch in a quick time a set being put in, but you don't really get to see all the moving parts of it. The best I can do is very crudely interview each of the crew of Kimberly Akimbo on this national tour because I want to know their perspectives and their roles of putting in a show and putting it back out again. And let's just have some fun. So, first off, tell me a little about what you do on Kimberly Akimbo.
My title is head sound engineer. So, and all that means is that people come to me first if there's a problem, mostly. Titles are really not that useful in our occupations. But I am entrusted, and my task is to try and get the entire system working in a particular venue in the time allowed, and hopefully getting everything set up so that the audience can actually hear what's going on, and that there's a certain musicality to it too.
So, well, you often around theater hear A1, A2. So
Yeah,
you're A1.
I'm A1, and,
Yeah.
and my assistant Kayla is A2.
How did they get that title? I mean, who decided A1, A2?
You mean as the A?
Yeah,
'Cause
well,
it's
we know
audio,
it's audio, but instead of saying audio person, they just say A1, A2.
Because everything.
Why don't do they have an L1 and L2 for lighting?
No, I don't think so. But
See,
then,
that's
but they
what I
have,
find interesting.
But they have more people in that department, so.
Okay.
And I don't think it. Maybe the electrics department differs in that way that any one of the electricians should be able to answer most questions, I guess.
Right.
So, which seems to be the case.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, how did you get interested in sound to begin with?
Sort of a obtuse path. I've always been interested in sound. I've always been very, very enamored with music. I grew up in a very musical household. Both my parents were in the symphony, so it was not uncommon for me to hear my mom practicing in the other room, or through the window if I was outside in the backyard. And she loved popular music as well as classical. So, and it wasn't uncommon for her to have, they would have parties, and more often than not, it was people from the symphony, and so there was always music playing. And they did not discourage me from studying music. So, and just music was so important. I don't know. So anyway, so audio has always been something that it's almost like a food group for me.
Yeah.
Let's see what I was going to tell you. I got involved in the sound department, just like I said. It was a very circuitous path. It wasn't a straight line.
And so, when did you become a professional AI?
Yeah, AI. Probably late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds right.
Okay. And what was the show?
I first got my feet wet going out with Les Mis.
Oh, okay.
And then I did a really short stint on Jekyll and Hyde. And but my first big jump into the pool was Les Miserables.
Was that on Broadway or
No, it was a tour. Everything I've done is, well, not everything I've done, but mostly what I've done is tours.
Okay. Do you prefer it
To what?
to just being in a regular theater for a short stint?
Not necessarily. I just think that touring, the challenges that touring presents, and the possible payoffs can be really high.
How so?
Because every time you go into a new venue, you don't know what's been going on with that venue. Maybe they're having a problem with their house equipment. Maybe there's a upheaval in how it's being staffed, or maybe they're doing work on the building. You just don't know. A lot of times you can have been to the theater before, but it doesn't mean it's going to be exactly the same every time you go.
Right.
So
you love the challenge.
Yeah, I do actually. I must.
Or you're insane,
Yeah.
which is kind of the same thing, isn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
All right, so let's talk about what actually do you have to do when it comes to loading in a show, or Kimberly Akimbo, or any show, but let's stick with Kimberly Akimbo.
Yeah.
What is your duties? What happens?
Well, you try and gather information before you get to the venue. I'll give you an example. Even though I've been to this venue, the Shays.
Here in Buffalo, New York, right?
Yeah. I had an opportunity because the hotel was so close to the venue, and I knew that the crew was going to be in the day before working on something entirely different. And it was later in the afternoon, but I walked over there anyway to see if they were still there. And a guy that was working there, who's a stagehand, let me in, and I was actually able to go in and reacquaint myself with the room and just kind of gird myself with some visual information and a reminder of what the room was like and what kind of challenges we would be presented with. And I knew that since I've been here before, I know the house sound guy pretty well, and he reminded me about some things. But so you're trying to gather information so that you're going to make more efficient use of your time, because time is so key, especially on this show since it's a one-day load-in. And you're also gathering information that will help you coordinate with the other departments.
Right.
Like I'll give you an example. Where we place the sound towers, there's certain criteria that there's goals that I'm after just from myself. I have some stake in the game as far as what I'm trying to do with the sound towers, but we have electric instruments on the tower too. We have lighting instruments that are mounted on the tower. So it can't
now this tower is in the front.
The sound tower, the ones on the sides.
And is it linked on either above as well, or is it just two separate towers?
There's a stage right tower and a stage left tower.
But it's not linked with something above. Okay.
No, yeah.
Right.
But so there's other departments that have a stake, an investment in where those towers ultimately are, because she can't make her shots if they're too far off stage.
Gotcha.
And also, the building wants to keep sightlines clearer. So,
Right.
you're also expending some effort to attempt to keep the towers from blocking sightlines, but at the same time you're trying to keep energy off the architecture. You want to make sure that the speakers, because if you can't see a speaker, then you're not hearing direct energy from the speaker. You're hearing reflected energy from the speaker, which is not always a bad thing, but when it comes to getting the show over the plate,
Right.
I'm using a baseball analogy here, when you're trying to get the product to the audience, especially one that's partially a comedy and the lines are moving quickly, you're striving for clarity, you're striving for intelligibility.
Right.
So that's really operating as part of your operating system. That's a program that's running underneath. It's just
Right.
You're constantly thinking about how do you make sure that the show is as concise as it can be when it gets to the audience. Oh, but you were asking me about the whole thing.
Right.
So I said gathering information, and I like to show up early if I can so I can talk to the riggers, because not everybody, the assumption that we always make is that because we're all speaking English, that the communication is unencumbered as it can be, but it's not the case.
Right.
Nomenclature is extremely important in the theater, and so is making sure that even if you're using the same words, that the person that you're communicating with understands what you're trying to convey. Because we make a lot of assumptions about, well, I said this, and this was very, very concise, and so how could anybody conclude a different
Right.
Result
Right.
or a different,
And riggers are all local, right?
Yeah, we
Right.
don't. We travel people who have experience in riggers, but we're not actually traveling somebody in our crew who's specifically like the tour rigger.
Okay.
So,
Is that normal?
yes and no. It depends on the workload, and sometimes you get lucky you have somebody who's worked as a rigger professionally who's in your crew. That's not always the case, and that's not necessarily a to your detriment. It just means that you rely sometimes on you rely more on the expertise of people who do it full time.
Right, got it.
But rigging is it's like if you're in a theater that has a fire curtain, nothing can obstruct the path of the fire curtain. So the tower has to be downstage of the smoke pocket, and rigging cannot obstruct the path of a fire curtain in the case of a fire.
Wow, that never occurred to me.
And also, there are shows that I'll travel with sometimes where we will build the show deck being higher, and if the show deck is breaking the smoke pocket, and by smoke pocket I mean the plane of the fire curtain where it to come in, you have to build extra pieces of deck so that there is a seal, a fire seal. So sometimes you'll be out on a tour and the carpentry department is tasked with building extra sections, and they're often they have to be fabricated for that stop alone because you don't know, in the relationship to the actual, like the proscenium, where's the proscenium? So how far do these little deck plugs have to go from the show deck to there to create a seal? So that when the fire curtain comes in there, it's not like a gap tooth. Right? It's actually creating a seal. So
is that an issue that we have with the show?
Not really.
Okay, good.
No. But and also sometimes I have to, when we're running cable between the offstage side of the sound tower and the proscenium wall, sometimes we're tasked with making sure that the cable is as flat as it can be going through there. So it basically is doing the same thing. It's accomplishing the same thing. And when the fire curtain comes in, right, you want to make sure it's like creating enough of a seal.
Wow, something that never occurred to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild the amount of things that you need to be cognizant of in addition to sound concerns.
Right.
Because there's so much in the, I think that's a misconception that not many people have the luxury of indulging in, which is that somehow our department is uncoupled from everything else and we don't have to be concerned about what their process is or what their needs are or what their goals are.
Right.
We can't do that.
No.
Because we're like a military maneuver. Like we're like that's not a great analogy, but
I understand. Yeah.
We're all like trying to accomplish ultimately the same goal.
Right.
So gathering information, figuring, because you're trying to keep from making mistakes, especially on a one-day load-in, that are going to set you back and make everything take a lot longer.
Do the sound towers come on the first truck for load-in, like all the lighting? Because that's got to be set up almost immediately.
Yes. The large parts of our system for the majority are on truck one. So we can get our hands on that stuff as soon as we can and start building,
So once the towers are up, then what happens?
It's funny because everybody gets stuck in their process and having a system that they adhere to. I mean, and one of the reasons is it's a practical thing that if you have a system that you adhere to, if you've forgotten to do something. So like if you always do the sound towers first, then, and also I like to be able to finish the task and turn my back on it.
Right.
So the problem with the towers is you can build the towers and think, oh, I'm done, but then you've got to spot the towers. You've got to stab the towers somewhere on the deck. That, like I said, you've got lighting instruments on the tower that you have to be thinking about, considering those things. Also, sight lines, etc. And also, sometimes you're involved in this horse trade. You're dealing with somebody who works for the building, like a production manager, maybe somebody who's from the front office, and they just, even if they knew those seats on the outside weren't going to be sold, they're still advocating strongly for what they're tasked with.
Right.
People are really focused on their thing, and that's like, by God, I'm not going to, no sidelines are going to be blocked. We don't even want to sell any seats as obstructed, even though that's probably the case, those farthest outside seats. And those are usually the last seats to be sold anyway. Right. Because they're not optimal.
Right.
Anyway, I'm digressing. But you were asking me about the towers. You typically do the towers first, but a recent venue, we had to do the cluster first.
The what again?
The cluster, the center truss.
Oh, okay.
We had
All
to
right.
build that first, which was, for me, is out of sequence. And at first I was it kind of nettled me a little bit, but I was like, you know what, dude, you have to be flexible. You have to be able to, because that's the only way to get this project done.
Right.
You have to be able to divert to some other task because it's all about available time.
Right, and it's got to be up in time for for that show that evening.
Yeah. So if you're forced to do something out of sequence, then that's how it is.
Right. And what happens on the truss?
That is our center line arrays, flown subs, orchestra source boxes, and downfill speaker.
Okay. What are all those?
Well, the downfill speaker is hangs at the very bottom of the triple stack of subs, and the downfill is very, very important for the first, anywhere from the first 3 rows to the first 8 rows, because even though you don't think about it, the seats that are closest to the stage often are the most starved of audio.
That makes sense to
reinforcement.
Me. Yes. Right.
Because the towers are wide and close to the audience. And even though these boxes that we're using are 100 degrees in dispersion pattern, horizontal, you can't count on it to you'd have to really tip them in. And besides, there's any number of reasons that you don't want to do that anyway. So you've got your front fills, which are sort of like an image anchor, but also that's just a place where you really need information to get vocals out over the energy that's pouring out of the orchestra pit. So the downfill is really key.
Right. Okay.
Very important.
Okay.
And so that's what the downfill is all about. We have a triple stack of subs that are in a cardioid pattern, and essentially that energy is for non-orchestra seating area.
What's cardio pattern?
Cardioid?
Yeah.
It's where you've configured the bass, the sub cabinets in a way that they're actually forming a pattern of low-end energy as opposed to it just being omnidirectional.
Oh, okay.
And then we have orchestra source boxes that are further out, that the only information that we're piping through those is orchestra.
Okay. All
So
right.
you've got orchestra coming at you from another direction, kind of filling in that picture, that sonic picture of the band. We use more electronic instruments in the pit than we ever have.
So that's a different thing. Yeah. Right.
So you're trying to, especially with this particular designer, who I fondly refer to as being more old school, but all I mean is that he's, his experience is informed by such a rich experience background, of watching the business change rather rapidly over time. So he's I love this designer. I can't say enough good about it. Anyway, so we have orchestra source boxes. Then we have 2 line arrays flanking the subs in the center, and those are invaluable because they help, bring the image on stage, but they also just are getting the performance to the audience.
Right.
So it's a pain in the ass because every time you go to a new room, you're resetting angles between those boxes because you're trying to optimize the delivery of energy to where you want it, not where you don't want it. And you're also, there's a lot of...
Yeah, I've played theaters where people will say, "Oh, the sound is just terrible there," and that has nothing to do with what you guys are doing. It's the configuration of it's a battle that you have to deal with. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a handful of venues across the country that are notorious among sound people because we know, and not just anecdotally, you've been there and you know how hard it is to win, because you're battling the characteristics of the room that you can't change. They can do little patches, little band-aids to change the sonic characteristics of a room, but it's really difficult once the room is built and the die is cast.
Right.
You're trying to mitigate things that make it more difficult. Some of these rooms, a great many theaters were built before sound reinforcement was even a thing.
Exactly.
And so they were built with a completely different goal in mind, or not necessarily, but just that their artistic sensibilities and what was actually being presented on the stage was so different.
Right.
So much more acoustic energy. So some of these rooms are really efficient at moving acoustic energy or not obstructing the transmission of acoustic energy. But when you start piping in, oodles more energy
Right.
And it's coming from a very specific source. It's not just omnidirectional. It's not, you're there's certain things that you just kind of have to forgo and say, well, even if I want the show to sound natural and sound like it's coming from the stage, that's a conceit that you don't get to indulge it as much because you're just trying to get the show to the audience.
Right.
I mean, it's funny because I know that it's a common perception that sound people can be aloof or that they're just they're so focused on some esoteric sonic product that's just in their head or whatever, but especially in this branch of the service where you're trying to please as many people in a room, disparate groups of it's so complex. There's people in there that their ability to hear is at all different kinds of levels, certain frequencies maybe they can't hear, or and especially now in this day and age where people have so much control of their audio environment,
right?
Whether they're in their car or sitting in front of their television with their sound bar, they have so much more control now about their sonic environment that it must be even far more frustrating for them to come to a theater and they basically have to accept the artistic target or product that somebody else envisions, right? And they're having to reconcile it with their brains and their ears. So
and then you're dealing with people with hearing issues.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Hearing instruments that.
Yeah, I've had people come to me at the sound console right at the end of intermission and say, I'm having difficulty hearing this or I'm hearing that. And a lot of what we try to do is just decipher what it is they're telling us or what their actual problem is. What exactly is it? So I ask a lot of very specific questions from a patron if they go through the difficulty of coming to the audio desk and complaining about it. Mm-hmm. And it's not uncommon for me to go where their seat is.
Gotcha.
Find out where their seat is, and then, maybe the A2 will mix, and I'll go during the show, and I'll listen and say, oh, I just understand completely what they're saying. Mm-hmm. Anytime you're near a big reflective surface like a wall or like those columns in the Wharton Center, those damn grain silos of misery that, because it's just, there were so many reflective surfaces in that room, and that's what you're up against.
Right.
I love that town, and the people there are great. But that venue is one of those venues where that the dice are loaded against you. Mm. But anybody, when they sit next to a large reflective surface, one of their ears, the ears facing the reflective surface, is having to reconcile with this incredibly complex device, this brain.
Right.
The arrival times, all the disparate arrival times coming in their left ear versus direct sound from their right ear, and also reflectivity from all the other bouncy surfaces on the right side. It's amazing. Wow. It's amazing how much work the brain is doing in the audience. And sometimes, if they're patient, their brains will do the math, and suddenly they can hear, they can understand. But it's that's really frustrating. You shouldn't necessarily have to put the audience in that position where they have to come in and work. That's something that's an expression that you hear sometimes, like, you don't want to make the audience work to get the show. Right. Because that doesn't really reflect our reality.
Gotcha. Right.
There was a time, I think there was a conceit among people in audio in the theater that they wanted the show, like it was a really large preoccupation or a goal of theirs was to keep the show sounding natural. Like it was coming from the stage and it wasn't being amplified at all. But, the obvious problems with that are, the more energy, the louder a show is, like with these jukebox musicals,
Oh God, yeah.
and it's not uncommon for people to replace interest and excitement in a show with more volume. You're like, well, they look like they're kind of going to sleep. Turn it up. I mean, it's.
Oh my God.
What can I say? Sometimes when you're flailing about and you're trying to replace something in a diet, you're like, well, melamine might be edible. I don't know.
So once you've got the tower, you've got the everything up there. When does the sound booth go in the back?
Oh yeah,
that
that setting up the console. That's usually because it's a smaller. It takes less people to accomplish. Mm-hmm. It's something that I'll do. Like, it's not a gross task. It's a small task. So it's something that even though I like to have it done as soon as possible, because there's a lot of interconnects that you have to make, and it's where you're going to work the whole week.
Right. And do you have to? I mean, I know you mix the show in the beginning when you take it. Do you ever have to remix things?
Oh,
because
yeah.
of different theaters all the time? Oh, jeez.
Well, are you talking about the actual mechanics of mixing the show?
Yeah.
No.
Then once it's mixed, it's mixed. Right.
Well, that is one of the chief goals that you have, is you're trying to set up the room. That's one of your priorities, is trying to get it so that the show that you are used to mixing will work for that room.
Right.
Because you don't want to add another level of complexity to saying, well, in the last room, I threw all the faders at this level and everything seemed fine. But in this venue, everything has to change. It's like you're trying not to do that, because mixing a show is already complex enough of a task. So you're trying not to overcomplicate it.
Right. Okay.
Right?
Right. Exactly.
So setting up the console is usually after the center cluster and the towers.
And I do understand, because we've had these issues before, not just with a touring company, but where all of a sudden the sound goes away. It just goes. And stage management says, well, that's because sound equipment doesn't like to travel in a truck.
Well, that is one possible explanation. I mean, yeah. It's a bad night when your equipment is not cooperating, mm-hmm. because of one thing or another. Like we've had to stop the show, and I've had to run backstage, and we've had to fix something that looks relatively innocuous, but it's like the linchpin for a lot of things. You're like, oh yeah, I guess that, I mean, and that's far more common now, because we live in the digital audio realm. So a lot of times you can come down to one small component has decided that it's had enough for the day, and it's going to go to its little vacation island and have a martini or margarita, when you would much prefer that it actually do the task that it normally.
Right. Mm-hmm. So sound is a headache.
That is a way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So once that's all set, then you're pretty much set, right? Except
No.
when No. Then what happens?
No. Once you get the towers and the center cluster constructed and in the air, and then you set up we don't have a system where you can check components before they're actually at trim. You know what I mean when I say trim? So for us, you're like, when I build that center cluster, or when me and the locals, like, I'm constantly checking cable connections to make sure that they're seated, because the last thing I want to do is have to bring that damn thing back in and work on it. But we've had to do it.
Okay.
We have to do it from time to time. Just something breaks. A wire becomes disconnected from a pin. There's certain things that you just can't account for, and there's certainly no way for you to inspect everything.
No.
Before you put it together, like open up a bunch of connectors, go, yeah, that looks good. I can't even imagine having that kind of time. But so hopefully, when you get the front console and all of its various cables and components and peripherals connected and energized, you get everything turned on, then you start turning on power to speakers, and hopefully by the time you actually playing some kind of program, music, through the console, you're going to be able to hear every single speaker. Mm-hmm. So we go through and we methodically listen for all the zones and make sure that everything's working. And meanwhile, I'm doing all this stuff, and my assistant is running so much cable.
Oh, wow.
Crossover cables to all the various foldbacks that are mounted on the lighting booms or the battens, or we have overhead foldback, we have side foldback, we have foldback mounted on the towers, we have foldback all over the place. So it blows my mind sometimes. I can get very, very in the weeds about what I have to do and everything, but the amount of work that my assistant is supervising and trying to accomplish is just, you wouldn't believe it. It's like it's the same amount of work, it's just different.
Right.
So and I mean, on this particular show in particular, I spend so little time. Like, it's a rarity for me to even be able to get into the orchestra pit during the load-in to help facilitate that. I mean, and this is like one of the few shows I've ever been on where I have not really been able to get into the orchestra pit during the load-in until it's actually time to seat the orchestra.
So Kayla's
Oh yeah, Kayla just.
Oh God, can't wait to get her in to talk.
Oh God.
Yeah.
The and she does it with such aplomb, the way that she is able to motivate and keep the crew moving and do so in a way, where, because whether we like it or not, I mean, there's a lot of technical stuff and equipment that we're thinking about, like if a problem pops up. But one of the most basic things that we have to do is deal with people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Communicate tasks as clearly as we think we can, even though that doesn't always, we think we're being clear, but we're not, as it turns out. But I mean, because you're sending people really far afield, and you're saying, here's the task. You have to set up the intercom system in the spot booth. So you're hoping that you have people who are experienced enough to where it isn't like waking up every day like a newborn and having to relearn a task. So, you're sending people, you're basically saying, go and make it so,
Well, so not only do you have to deal with just the audience people to hear, but you got to be responsible for intercoms so crews can talk to each other. You have a lot, everything that
camera
goes with
shot,
sound,
video,
everything.
Yeah, we have cameras that are generating video shots that have to go to a bunch of different destinations.
Right.
And there are people who depend keenly on the quality of the integrity of their video shot, and if it's bouncing in and out, or if it's not focused, or
they go silent in the pit somewhere,
or if it's panned one way.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the blessings on this show is we don't have automation, because automation, those guys really rely on their video, the integrity of their video transmission. They have to be able to have as many eyes as they can on all of their moving parts, and if something happens, it makes them very nervous, mm-hmm. for a good reason. Same thing with the stage management desk. They need to be able to see that actors are clear from out from underneath a drop that has to come in.
Right.
Or if there's a piece of scenery that has to move, and the move has to be completed before they can give a clear to actors.
Right.
Or even start the scene. So, and we drew the short straw. Our department is responsible for video shots.
Right. Wow. Okay.
So that's another thing. But going back to the thing where the previous topic about dealing with local crews, mm-hmm. And it was certainly far more difficult right after the pandemic lockdown culminated, because there were a lot of people who just left the business and they took a lot of experience with them.
Whoa,
so we had
we
had a lot of really inexperienced people showing up on our crews, and it wasn't anybody's fault. It was just the reality on the ground. It was like a supply chain issue. You've got people left the business either because they couldn't afford to wait around for the jobs to return, or they just said, I wasn't going to retire for another 5 years, but you know what, I'm going to do it now. And they took just a wealth of information and knowledge about how the business works and how their various theater has to be approached. And so for a while, it was pretty touch and go getting shows loaded in. We worked much harder as mm-hmm. road crews, because mm-hmm. we just had to do a lot of stuff that we would perhaps previously task the locals with. We just had to take on those extra
jobs
because at the end of the day, people, the people at the top of the food chain are like, well, did the show get open on time?
Yeah.
They're not interested in the details, the minutia, our various, sad stories. They don't. I mean, I don't know if I want to go that far, but
Yeah.
but
Well,
the bottom line
we
is,
could talk about how the business is now corporations instead of the mafia, but there we go.
I mean, the bottom line is you have a task to complete, and people are not. They're interested in the results, not the process.
Yeah. That's too bad because theater I love is the process.
But for us, the end users, the people who, are on the ground, for us the process can either be not easy. I'm not going to use the term easy, but it can either be less painful or far more painful.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So what's the last thing that happens in the load-in then?
The last thing in the load-in, you mean before we actually start the sound checks?
Right.
We have to make sure that everything's working. So Kayla, the assistant, and I'm really reluctant to even refer to her as an assistant. We're like we're definitely co.
You're audio 1 and 2. That's all.
Yeah, we're like thing 1 and thing 2.
That's
they can
right.
both turn your furniture upside down
Absolutely.
and destroy the house, and
Right.
they're both tasked with the same goal.
Right.
Yeah. So thing 1 and thing 2 have to.
I'm going to start referring to you as thing 1 and thing 2.
That would be fine with me. So we have to do a complete line check in the pit, make sure that all the equipment that we have set up, like all the microphones are talking. We can hear those microphones, and they don't sound broken or weird or something's not strange or out of place. All the speakers have to be working. I have to make sure that the time alignment of the system is about as good as I can get it before the sound check starts.
What's the time alignment?
Well, you want to make sure that you are hearing all of the speakers speaking in a relatively coherent phase, and that they're all talking at the same time.
Okay.
Because there's nothing worse than having, especially if you have to tie into speakers that belong to the theater, that are part of their installation.
Right.
Like if you're going to integrate those into your show, they have to also make sense from a time arrival standpoint.
And that's got to be a nightmare because every theater's got a different issue.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's always, every theater has either dead spots, weak spots, places where hopefully the theater has gathered together the willpower to make it happen and put a speaker in those problem areas, and hopefully it's a quality speaker and not just a cup with a string attached to it or whatever. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the funny thing. Also, funny and sad. You go into some of these older theaters and they're almost like a museum. I mean, they are sort of museums anyway, but a lot of times there's equipment you're just like, oh my God, you guys still have these? You're actually still relying on these? But it is not uncommon, when a theater gets their hands on some money to do some kind of redo or improvement.
Right.
Sound is often the last person in line,
standing
in line with their hand out going, what would be great is if we actually had some speakers that were newer than 30 years old. But hey, that bathroom does need more shiny tile. Or whatever.
We need a nameplate on this.
Yeah. Somebody needs to own this stairwell. Somebody needs their name on this stairwell. So, there are a lot of things that I do. They're not enormous. They're not like fundamental changes, but I mean, everything changes when you get a band in the pit and you get actors on stage.
Right.
You can make a lot of decisions and come to a lot of conclusions about how you want things to sound in the room, and they're relevant and they're important and they impact what's the final product. But you really, a lot of times it's sort of like the unveiling isn't until you have a cast on stage and a band in the pit. And then you go, the energy returning from the back of this room is going to be a problem.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So.
And we've been on stage and the room is much more alive than another theater.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, does that answer?
I think so.
Okay.
I find this. I find sound absolutely one of my most favorite things to explore. Um, the whole process of sound is fascinating to me. Maybe it's because I like to sing. I don't know, but sound is and we don't get to know the inner workings of sound much, because you don't see it.
Yes, it seems like you're only actually aware of it if it's malfunctioning. If something's,
Right.
that's what I tell people.
Yeah.
Like sometimes people they'll come to me and they'll say, how did you do? Or how's the room? Or, I say, typically my answer is, if we are not noticed, then it is a job well done.
Yeah.
Because you don't want people to notice audio.
Right.
And really, that's not, because because people notice when something goes wrong in audio.
Right.
They don't need to know anything about the theater at all. They don't need to have any technical expertise. If somebody walks out on stage and they open their mouth to sing and you don't hear them,
Right.
That's a fairly glaring problem that most people will notice right away.
Mm-hmm.
And you are doing your damnedest to avoid moments like that in the audio department.
Right. And then you have cast members that are sick, and then you have an understudy come in. Then does that change for you?
Oh, yeah.
How you mix in?
Yeah.
You have to be aware that Regina's on right now, so this is going to be different from
Oh,
Marcus,
yeah.
right?
Absolutely. And if you have the luxury of spending enough time behind the console with them on stage, because a lot of what I do, I mean, that's one of the reasons that it's nice to have the full company on, because you've spent the most time with the full company mixing them, and you know whose voices are going to stick out in a section, and you are already prepared for that.
Right.
Or like a particular timbre of voice that will be harder to hear, and you're already prepared for that.
Right.
Because there's only so much you can accomplish with EQ and volume. Sometimes you just have to have enough of an intimate relationship with whatever it is you're doing that you're already prepared for moments in the show where you know that you're going to have to do certain things to react.
Right. And
before it happens.
And it's live theater, so things happen.
Oh yeah.
With the performer and the musicians and the this and it's okay. All right, here we go. It's going to be this tonight and not that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because there's some people that it's the worst part of their day if something different happens. Like they want consistency.
That's no fun.
But it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
Because if somebody comes out on stage and they were out late the night before drinking and just yelling at the top of their lungs, they're not going to have the same energy the next day. Or if somebody's a little bit under the weather, or they're congested, or maybe they're really distracted.
Or they've done 8 performances a week and you're fucking tired.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Did I tell you? I think I told you recently that one of my favorite shows, weirdly, is the last show of the week.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like alchemy. Like sometimes, everybody's exhausted, the crew's tired, the cast is really tired, and you never know what kind of audience you're going to have for a Sunday night performance. Mm-hmm. But sometimes they're great performances.
I know. It surprises me every time.
Right?
Yeah.
But everything has to fall into place. And most of those things you have no influence on whatsoever. Right. But in the one place that you do have influence, you're trying to, you're trying to make something. You've got all these ingredients sitting on the kitchen counter. You don't necessarily have a recipe, but you're really hoping that whatever it is that results from the process is going to be delicious.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes it really is.
Right. Right.
And sometimes it's like, oh, let's get out of here. I mean, yeah, it's like, as you say, it's live theater. But there are times when something will happen that's unplanned. Somebody will go up on their lines. Something will happen. A snowflake will slowly drift down from the rigging or whatever, and it's just...
The bench doesn't come on, so everybody figures out how to do a scene without the bench. Yeah.
I mean, those moments can be so funny.
Oh, I love them. I love when the odd thing happens. Yeah.
And it really forces, like, you really see what your cast is made of, to see it, when you see how well they can roll when they're thrown a variable like that. And I don't wish it on them, but sometimes the result is just priceless. You're like, wow, That was a great way to get through that. Or that was so inventive. You know, you have to just congratulate people on stage because of their ability to roll with something happening
Right.
out of the ordinary.
Right. Right.
I don't know. And sometimes I'm out front. I'm just like, gnashing teeth and.
That's all right. We're trying not to gnash them backstage too.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So you've got everything in place. It has to be done at a certain time because the band then has to come in and check all their sound stuff and make sure that they can be heard and blah blah blah. And then we ask the cast to come in one by one to just go over a number so while we're out there singing a song, you are running around different parts of the theater with your little pad.
My Tinker Toys,
Yeah. And just trying to balance it all the way around the room, aren't you?
Yeah, basically. I'm trying to go all of the places in the theater and get a good representation of how the show will be presented in that particular spot. And you know, you have to assume that every seat's going to be sold when in many cases they're not.
Yeah.
Like the last town we were in, there was like half the balcony was always empty, and they knew that from the start. But we can't just turn a blind eye to those seats and say, well, nobody's going to be sitting there anyway, because that's exactly when, you know, busloads of retirees are going to show up. And,
right.
you know, you just have to assume that the whole room is sold, and you have to try and make sure that you can hear the show in all of those places.
And now, when the theater is not full, that changes the dynamics of sound too.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great when there's energy bouncing around the room and it doesn't really have. There's not a target for it, or there's not a place for it to terminate.
Wow, that's something I didn't think about. Yes, of course.
Right?
Absolutely.
Bodies absorb energy.
Right.
And also, you know, the bottoms of seats, when they're up, it's usually metal.
Yes.
So that's a reflective surface. If people are not seated in rows where there's concrete below their feet, there's no way for this energy to terminate or to be ameliorated by absorbent surfaces, things to break up those waves.
Wow. Then the ultimate theater to be built would have to have sound thought of all the way through. Yeah, that's not going to happen. But that never occurred to me that the seat being up would be yes,
right.
Of course.
Right. Any unsold seats are just more zones where energy is just going to bounce right past it and keep traveling until it's tired.
Yeah.
So yes, the character of a room changes with a full audience,
right.
And it's also changes with a half audience.
Right. So when you're out there in an empty house, listening to us sing on stage, you also have to be aware that when it's full.
You'll notice it. You'll notice it. Like I can hear, even though I'm really under a deep balcony here, I can hear the decay time in the balcony. Yeah, you can hear it. You can hear it how it lingers and bounces around.
Right.
And you know that that is a byproduct that's not necessarily productive for the purposes of hearing the show. Yeah.
So that's the last task you have to do in the load-in, correct?
What, the sound check?
Yeah. No.
Pretty much, unless there was a technical problem we couldn't resolve, we didn't have time for. And so after the sound check's over, we're, going back to focusing cameras or finding out why a camera's not working, or going and finding out why a cue light's not. Well, cue lights are mostly electric issue, but
we can't hear
in a dressing room.
Yeah,
like here.
Yeah.
I saw our stage manager and he said, "Hey, I've got two of our principals complaining that they're not hearing stage calls."
I wouldn't say complaining.
Well,
it was
what
something we noticed.
We were getting feedback. We were getting input from our cast members, and that's no good. I mean, if there's a speaker in that room, they should be hearing program through it. But what the head of the local A2 remembered, there were people who had been in there with a previous production who did not want program in those rooms.
Right.
But there were no potentiometers on the wall to control it, so they had to disconnect physically.
He came in with a ladder and fixed the parts. Yeah.
And that was the fix.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon. That's actually very common.
Hmm.
For things like that to pop up in a theater, and even if they're new theaters,
Right.
there's always something that somebody did and didn't undo,
Right.
or it's just there's so much information that not one person can collate, and there's no master cylinder.
No. So when it comes to loadout, is it everything in reverse?
Mm-mm.
No.
Loadouts are easier. I'm not a fan of loadouts because you're tired when they happen.
Right.
But taking everything down is so much more direct than putting it up.
Mm-hmm.
You're not worried about how the room's going to sound while you're tearing down your equipment.
Right. Just don't want to break it. That's all.
Yeah. Exactly. You're trying to, and also, you're hoping and striving to keep things safe.
Right.
Because what we're doing is inherently dangerous. We're using chain motors. We have heavy equipment above people's heads.
Right.
We're trying to, even though, once again, we're on a very tight time schedule, and there's expectations about getting that show out within a certain amount of time. At the same time, you're trying to put everything away in an orderly fashion so that, one, it works when you take it out of the box, and two, you know where it is on the end.
Mm-hmm. And so the next load in is it's not as
That you're not making it overly complex because
Right.
you were sloppy on the out.
right.
And also, we're just trying to make sure that people don't get hurt. Landing the towers and the tower dollies. There's numerous ways you can really get hurt
Mm-hmm.
if you're not paying attention. And
when you're tired and a loadout, that's when accidents can happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. How long is a load in for you, and how long is a load out?
The load-ins on this particular tour, we start, the spotting call starts at 7 a.m. So you actually have people from carpentry in at 7 a.m. because they have to spot where motors need to land and do their calculations to make sure that the motors end up where they need to end up. And so that starts at 7. I like to walk in a little bit early. So anyway, we're usually there, we're always there by 8 a.m. That's when the load-in starts. And we have 2 scheduled meal breaks.
Oh, that's good.
But sometimes we have to work through them. Like we had to work through one of the meals in the last town. Was it the last town? There was just too many things piled up, and we were behind, and it's not always for the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
So we basically worked through one of our meals in the last load-in, which is not all that surprising. But so we'll work right up till showtime. I mean, assuming, of course, that you have the 2 meal breaks. So, but you're basically in your game mode until the show is over.
Right. When was the latest you went to bed because of the loadout?
It's not uncommon for us to finish a loadout and not go to bed.
Right.
Before we have to get on the plane.
Right.
Because you think about how much time you need to allot for getting to the airport early enough. Because especially now, flying,
Oh, it's a nightmare.
right?
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you have time to get through security. You want to make sure that
And enough time in case there's delays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really obnoxious sometimes when you do all of those things. You don't go to sleep. Maybe you're one of those people that has really got their shit together and they'll be packed, completely ready to walk out the door of their hotel room. That doesn't describe me, by the way.
No.
Anyway,
Yeah.
but so it's not uncommon for us to really be grossly underslept
Right.
the day of a loadout.
Right.
And
Well,
it's
thank God, most of the time, the glass show is an early show on a Sunday.
Yeah, that's helpful.
My favorite is when there's only a matinee
Oh.
and no Sunday night show.
Yeah, that's so uncommon anymore.
Yeah.
That's really uncommon. It's usually only, well, you know what the circumstances are. Maybe the drive to the next destination is just too long.
And some places in Florida, they don't do a Sunday night show
That's true.
because they just don't get an audience, so they just don't do it.
That's true.
Right.
That's true. And even though it's a change to my sequence, my schedule, so it on the one hand, it's great to not have to do a night show and to go roll right into a loadout after one show only. And then sometimes you're like, oh gosh, my normal sequences.
Yeah, right.
So I guess in some respects we're creatures of habit, even though there aren't that many habits.
So you have all the towers and stuff on truck one. The cords are on a different truck, right?
No, our front of house mults, a lot of our cable is also on truck one.
Okay.
Because you don't want to have to wait for truck 3 to roll in before you can accomplish these goals.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all front house stuff, right?
Your Balk rail mults. Yeah. Let's say you're in one of those really unfortunate positions where they don't have any infrastructure to the spot booth, and you actually have to run a spot booth molt.
Ooh.
Which still happens. Because there's some buildings you can't rely on the integrity of those lines, those electrical lines going to the booth. Or maybe they're outside, they've already surpassed the recommended spec'd distance over which like the intercom will work dependably. Like if sometimes you think that you have a much shorter cable path to the spot booth than you do, and then you actually, once you start digging in and asking people, like, how long do you actually think that this cable path is? And they're like, oh, it's probably 450 feet. And you're like, oh my God, no wonder the intercom is not working.
Oh God.
Or it's working intermittently. Like, those electrons are like, come on, guys, we can get there. And then some days they're like, oh, to hell with this. I don't feel like it. So that happens.
Okay. Is there anything that that I didn't ask you about sound, loading in and load out?
No.
Okay.
I mean, technically, no.
Yeah. Do you have an idea of what you're going to do after the show closes?
This tour?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Some people are keen on making sure that they have another gig lined up. And there have been times when I've been like, I need to know that I have a job. But for some reason, this one, I'm like, I just want a little time off.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
I'll spin that wheel, and hopefully something will come up. But I mean, I'm also going to make phone calls and send emails and just let people know that I'm going to be looking for, work. But at the same time, be nice to go home and pet a cat.